Hey there, Internet. Saiaku-sama here. First, I'd like to apologise for not posting in 11 months. Sorry, YouTube. You deserve better than that. Secondly, the point of this particular video, an artist called Cameron Dad, yes, Dad, that's his name, he approached me and asked me for help with his art. He said, Saiaku-sama, how do I do the art thing? He showed me some of his artwork. These are some of the images that he sent me. Now, these are older images. He's come along a lot since then, but you can instantly tell when looking at them that he has a basic understanding of sort of like construction lines and simulating rough shapes and putting them together to create a character. You could tell that he's only just beginning to dabble in digital art at this point, but he has told me that he has very recently bought a tablet, when before you could tell he was using a mouse on the old Microsoft Paint. Brings me back. In this video, I'm going to sort of try and go through my own interpretation of this character. Now, when you go into a character design, you can't go into it blind, my friend. You need to know when you're going for a design what your intentions are. And I think style is the most important thing. If you're doing it in an anime style, there are so many types of anime style. So do your research. Go onto Google Images and find a collection of images that you can use as reference. You're not copying, you're sort of using it as reference. It's only copying if you make the deliberate effort to make it exact. But in this context, it's not copying because you're taking inspiration from certain elements. You're using it for reference. You're saying, oh, so that is how light hits a face. You look at the images that you've put together and you go to your drawing and say, okay, why is my drawing not look right? And you look at the reference, you look at your drawing, and you're like, oh, because clothes don't fold like that. You can see this here is my reference picture. Now, and I saw the piece of artwork that the artist, Cameron, gave me. I sort of looked at the design he did and basically went through Google Images for anime style, because I knew he was doing an anime style, and found a bunch of anime styles that I think are close to what I think he was trying to do, or at least close to what I saw when I looked at it. And I put together those for reference. So these are the images that I'm going to be taking inspiration by when going through the design. Now the character has clothes. Cameron designed this character with a cool long coat, like a trench coat thing. So I got images of that for reference, so I know when I'm drawing it how a trench coat looks. Now the character has his hands in his pocket. He has it in his in Cameron's design, the character has his hands in his jacket pocket. And I went through Google and I started looking for images of that, so I know what that looks like. I know where how the lines would fold in certain areas. And I decided to sort of violate his design a little bit, and instead of having the character's hands in his jacket pocket, which is how Cameron designed it, I will have his hands in his trousers or his pants, and the pockets in his trousers, instead of in his jacket, which I thought was so much more dynamic. I just want to point out that it is important to have personality in your character's pose. The way your character stands identifies his personality. I think that Cameron had a good idea about that when you had the character with his hands in his pockets. That type of position with both hands in your pockets, sort of looking down a little bit, expresses a character that's more sort of reserved. However, I took that a big step forward and I wanted to do something a little bit further than that, where I had the character with one hand in the pockets and the other one was snapping his fingers with his winking expression. This here shows something a little bit more upbeat in personality. This is something I probably would encourage you try and experiment more so in the future with your character designs. Give your character a personality type and try to get that across in your design in the way the character is standing and like poses and expressions. At the beginning of the video, there was a time lapse speed drawing thing of me drawing Cameron's character, and if you looked in that during that segment, it looked like it was broken down into like phases or stages, and well, let's talk about that. Because sort of this is like stage 1, and then I do a stage 2, and a stage 3, and a stage 4, and so on, and you'll see how the drawing comes together. For the duration of the video, I'm going to explain each phases and their purpose. Stage 1, very rough. These types of lines are the ones you do not want to commit to, because these are the ones you're going to rub out. And they're supposed to be rubbed out. This here is the guidelines to help drive the drawing forward. The basic shapes have been broken down from the faceplate to the chest piece to a pair of underwear that I draw that are important to show the distance and width of the hips in comparison to the chest and the shoulders. The circles that tiny circles I've drawn represent the joints, which are important in the drawing to know where they are on the body, because that will come into terms later. The second stage, you can see a lot more detail. I did sort of a grid on the faceplate. This here represents some more important details. Now, again, these are construction lines, so don't commit to them overly, because you're going to likely be rubbing them out or lowering the opacity, making them harder to see later on. These are not your hard lines, the ones that are going to be seen on the final piece. These are the pieces and lines that are going to help drive the drawing forward. So when you do commit to your final line work, you are confident. You've went through these stages. You know that your drawing reads well. The grid that you see on the faceplate has a line directly down the center. Now, this is good because this allows you, the drawer, to identify what the perspective of the face is in a 3D space. Now, you're not drawing 3D, you're drawing illustration, you're drawing 2D. But you do, even if you're drawing illustration, you do need to think, if this drawing existed in a 3D space, and you need to sort of visualize that. And that is where this grid on the face and on the head, or style of grid in the face and head, it comes in value. The line down the center represents how much the head is turned towards the viewpoint. The two lines on the faceplate, they represent whereabouts on the face the eyes are going to. You'd be drawing the eyes in those square grids. I've added lines onto the stickman that originally existed and just gave some more context to how the neck integrates into the shoulders and that goes down, and how the arm folds and how the joints thing. Again, very rough, but as you noticed, stage 1 was very rough. Stage 2 was a little more detailed, and stage 3, which we'll be getting to, is even more so. Here's something interesting about stage 3. Now, the character design is not a naked character. However, I have not committed to the clothing yet. And here's why. Because the human body has muscle. Now, the character I'm drawing is a very skinny character. It doesn't have much muscle, but he does have muscle. It exists. And how much muscle he has and how his body type and all that stuff comes into fold, because when you design clothes, the clothes will fold over each joint and each muscle, differently depending on the body types. This is something that I personally, as a general rule for myself, like to implement when drawing character designs. Now, these muscle lines are not completely accurate, but it is important. This is an argument for doing drawing studies. So you know about the muscles and where they fold and where they overlap. As you can see in this drawing here, I did it was almost as if your construction lines, the muscles and the muscle fibers, even though they're not going to be seen in the final image, but it is important to have a mental note. You could do a rough sketch, or you can use your imagination just to know that they are there. And then once you've had those muscle shapes, you'll notice that I break them down, I loosen them. But in this drawing, the guy looks toned, he looks ripped, but the character's not supposed to be. So how do we decrease that? Well, these line work here is just so you understand where the muscles exist on. When you break them down, you mostly just go over the lines that indicate it. Now, this drawing is done in a sort of anime style, and one of the things that I notice personally in a lot of anime style or manga style is a lot of lines are broken lines. It is the lines that are complete are the strong, hard lines. They're the ones that are going to read from the distance. But when you have details that are sort of not as important, they break them up. Things that if you were to have a bunch of very thick lines to consist a whole drawing, the drawing would not read well from a distance. So in anime style, they break down certain lines and have lines that don't connect. As you notice from the last drawing, the chest muscle goes from the shoulders and then across the chest. Well, here you can just see a little line under the armpit and a little bit in the center of the chest. This indicates that he doesn't have huge chest muscles, but there's a little something there. You notice again with the pattern, you see where the muscle lines are on the arms in the full muscle version and from the altered version. And with the abs, you can see which bits I've decided to get rid of and decided to keep. I recommend just playing around with it, which lines you want to keep and which ones. And by breaking it down, then adding to it and breaking it down, you can really have a control to how toned the character is or how not toned. Remember I mentioned earlier that your character will exist in a 3D space. Well, this here is called a perspective grid. You notice I did a bit of a cube there to represent the perspective, that this world that you're putting your character in is a 3D space. Your character is not just floating in the middle of the air. So you need to have in mind that he is standing on the ground. Therefore, you need to think back leg, where is it standing? Front leg, where is it standing? And you can definitely see. What I would like to do if I would finish this is I'll draw a little shadow, a little circle underneath where the character's feet to represent that he is standing on the ground. He's not floating in the air, he's standing in the ground. You notice his leg is a little bent. You see the joint in his leg is bent because on his back leg, his foot is almost on its heel very slightly. Because the foot is elevated to its heel, tiptoe, the knee will be bent very slightly. And because the foot is in the background and the front foot is in the foreground, you can see from the perspective grid where those are in correspondence to each other. This is something I would encourage all people to try and do. When you draw a character, don't just have him floating in the middle of the air. Really pay attention to the idea of what he is standing on. Even if you're not going to draw the ground itself, do a little shadow. Or imagine a perspective grid so you know where the feet are in correspondence to the ground. So now you can see the design. I've actually added clothes on it. Now what I mentioned at the beginning about your reference, always go back to your reference. There's a good thing I did because this was what allowed me to have the clothing look exactly the way I want it to look, because I have a point of reference. I want to give the guy a trench coat. Well, I could try and imagine what a trench coat is, or a long coat, and I would very likely be wrong. How about I do one better and actually have an image of a long coat or trench coat to reference by? Again, what I mentioned, if people get afraid of using reference materials, feeling like I'm cheating, I'm not being genuine to the piece. No, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. You're not replicating the drawing piece by piece inaccurate and then claim it off your own. And if it makes you feel any better, you can say to people, if they are complimenting your art and you feel guilty, you could tell them that you used images for reference, such as images of a long coat. So when you draw a long coat on your character, you know how to draw one, and so on and so forth. Now, earlier we drew the muscles on the character, broke it down, but it was important that we did that at that stage because, as you notice in this drawing, you can see on the shoulder the way that the shoulder bulges and then creases by the deltoid, which is the muscle on your shoulders, which we drew earlier. Now, we wouldn't have known that the clothes should bulge there, and because we knew how big those particular muscles were, and here's the case of this character, how not big they were, we knew by which point how much the shoulder would bulge in that. Under the armpit, if the arm's down, always do sort of like a free prawn crease. At least that's something I do in the clothes under the armpit. And there's a number of creases. Now, again, go to your reference pictures. You can't guess where the creases are. No, I did. I shouldn't have. So that was a bad on me. And something that I would do better in the future. In hindsight, I should have been going back on my reference images more than I actually did. I don't think the creases that I did on the clothes are accurate. I was mostly going from my imagination, which is something one would be very tempted to do. But that is why we took these reference pictures. I want to make it very clear that I'm not a teacher. I'm not qualified to teach art, and I don't want anyone to take anything in this video and say this is how you're supposed to draw. There's no way you have to draw. I've been drawing for the majority of my life, and there's been some tips and tricks I picked up on the way that have proven valuable, and I hope they prove value to others too. I would like to thank Cameron for giving me the opportunity or the excuse to make a video like this. It's something that's been on my bucket list for a while, and definitely follow Cameron on Instagram, and have a jolly good one.